Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, did a grandmother spark the current flare-up between India and Pakistan? We examine if the two countries can have lasting peace without resolving the fight for control of Kashmir. Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for all your live feedback. Malika, lots to talk about. 10 years have passed since the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, but this recent flare-up has left several dead on both sides, and quite predictably a lot of tension. How's our community weighing in?
Well, they're saying that until these tensions between India, at least the tensions between India and Pakistan can never be resolved unless they deal with the dispute over Kashmir. And we got a lot of great tweets. This one from Majid kind of eloquently sums it up. He says, "I feel for the people living at the periphery on both sides. It's almost a no man's land where shells fly more frequently than birds." Now, of course, for all of those of you at home, we want you to join the conversation as well and let us know what you think. Use the hashtag AJStream.
To Malika's right is Moeed Yusuf, South Asia advisor at the U.S. Institute of Peace, where he manages the Pakistan program. Moeed, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Today, we are also joined by a number of individuals on the ground who will be sharing their thoughts with us in just a minute. They're coming in via Google Plus Hangout. Now, of course, you can be in the stream just like they are. All you have to do is go to the link and add us to your circles.
Hi, my name is Melina Brisso. I run an NGO based in São Paulo, Brazil that works with violence prevention, and I am in the stream.
Deadly clashes between the Indian and Pakistani armies are raising fears about another major conflict brewing over the disputed region of Kashmir. It's been 10 years since both sides agreed on a ceasefire at the line of control. The line of control actually divides Kashmir into two regions, one under the control of Pakistan and the other India. But 3 cross-border incidents last week left 4 soldiers dead. Tensions are on the rise, and the Indian Army chief has warned Pakistan not to tempt India into retaliation. Both sides deny violating the ceasefire, and both have filed formal complaints at the UN. So what started this flare-up? According to a detailed report by the Hindu news site, the clashes came after a series of events that began when a 70-year-old grandmother crossed into Pakistan-controlled Kashmir to be with her sons and grandchildren. The report says her move across the line of control prompted India to build bunkers along the border. Pakistan saw that as a violation of the ceasefire. Now, as fears of a new conflict between India and Pakistan grow, Kashmir is caught in the middle. The two countries have fought 3 major wars, 2 of them over the disputed area. So, is lasting peace possible without resolving the question of Kashmir? To help us answer this, we're also joined via Skype from New Delhi by Tridivesh Singh Maini, columnist and editor of a book titled Warriors After War. Indian and Pakistani retired military leaders reflect on relations between the two countries, past, present, and future. Tridivesh, welcome to the stream.
Thank you very much.
So, Moeed, I want to start with you. What do you make of last week's clashes and the tension that is now brewing between India and Pakistan? Kind of give us a sense of how fragile you think things are.
I think the initial sense was that this is a one-off. This is Pakistan, India back to the old tricks. The LOC is very heavily manned, but yet there is infiltration. You talk about the grandmother crossing. This completely could be inadvertent or deliberate. But every time something like this happens, there is somewhat of a reaction from both sides. And that's what one thought. This was a one-off. It's going to pass. I think the problem is that there was an overreaction from the Pakistani side when this happened, perhaps. The Indian side overreacted in its own way. And before you know it, Pakistan and India are today amidst a media on both sides which is so vibrant, so free, so energetic that it becomes a press war. And so I don't think either side really wanted to take this to the point that it's gone. But with the media pressure, the press, the government weighing in, the Indian Army chief's statement, you suddenly realize things are getting out of control. And we're sitting here talking about this. The fundamental point is that for the past year, both sides have been saying their relationship is improving. This is how fragile their relationship really is. That even when they're on the uptake, it just can flare up at any moment.
Tridivesh, we're talking about how fragile this situation is. We're talking about a 7-year-old grandmother that may have sparked all of this. And Moeed says it may have been an overreaction, but it makes one think that if a 70-year-old grandmother going to see her grandkids has sparked this, that it could be a situation of either side just waiting for one thing to give them a reason to act in an aggressive manner. What do you think is going on here?
I think I would agree with Moeed about the fact that it's a very fragile relationship. But I would also like to add a few points to this. It's, the reactions, the overreaction by the media on both sides aside, it also has a lot to do with the domestic politics on both sides. I mean, if you look at Pakistan, for example, elections are coming up, and this is the first civilian government which has lasted nearly 5 years. But but one can't help to, sort of link this up to either the fact that political parties want to, cash in on such a thing. But I don't think political parties would want to do that because they've invested so much in peace in Pakistan as well. So I don't know whether it's a military-civilian sort of tussle in Pakistan. And then on top of that, in India, if you look at it, while Dr. Manmohan Singh has invested a lot in this peace initiative, there have been those within the Congress party and outside who have been critical of his peace overtures, saying that this is unrequited and Pakistan has reciprocated on the core issues. So it boils down to the fact that it's not only a question of India and Pakistan, it's also the polarized positions within both countries. It's a George Bush-like sort of thing, that either you're with us or you're against us. Even if you look at the reactions, I mean, you have two schools of thought. One which says that dialogue should go on irrespective of whatever happens. And then you have the other school of thought which starts linking this up even to people-to-people contact.
Tridivesh, I want to interrupt you for just a second because I'm being told by my producer that right now in Al Jazeera English we are doing some breaking news coverage and we are announcing that there is Kashmir violence by the Pakistani army and one soldier has been killed. And that's unfolding.
Wow.
One Pakistani soldier has been killed, my mistake, and that's unfolding right now as we speak. The line of control has been breached 10 times in the last month. And if you look at the situation there historically, when there have been that many breaches and this kind of build-up, bad things have happened, like in 2008, that sort of led up to the Mumbai attacks. Do you see things escalating to that degree with this situation?
Before I came, I was just checking up with some people in Pakistan on how they were seeing the situation. And one message I got consistently was, this is not the end of it. The worst may be over, but this hasn't been resolved. 0102, the crisis in 2001, 2002 is a great example. The infiltration was going up and you thought that things were still okay. There was a ceasefire after Kargil and it suddenly blew up in the face. And so one hopes that between 08 and now, lessons have been learnt, that war cannot be fought. There is no point getting it to a point of crisis. At the same time, most crises happen despite leaders wanting them. And so I don't see this yet becoming something of a crisis. But quite honestly, if you continue with this pattern, one more Pakistani soldier, as you're saying, another Indian one, God forbid, and you just lose control of this.
Yeah. Well, one of the things resonating among our community members is that oftentimes what's lost is the Kashmiri voices. Direction says Pakistan and India use Kashmir to forward their own agendas. The only people missing are the Kashmiris. Another tweet here from Shahid who says thousands of mass graves dot the landscape in Kashmir. Mothers are in eternal wait for their disappeared sons. We are suffering. And one more, Jahangir in our Google Plus Hangout. I'd like you to listen to this one from Majid. He says, when the concertina wire weaves your nightmares, overshadows your home, stretches lengths, imagine the line of control. Now, Jahangir, of course, you're a blogger and you're in Srinagar in Kashmir. I'd like to know your thoughts and what you're seeing and if these tweets that I just read resonate with you.
I mean, this is the sheer tragedy of having a border between two parts of the same territory, which is bound to create humanitarian crisis. We are seeing this happen in Palestine and we are seeing this happen in Kashmir as well. And both the issues are coincidentally the longest pending issues before the United Nations. Let me go into the brief history of what happens at these borders. When India and Pakistan signed the Karachi Agreement, the imaginary line that was drawn by two countries to divide Kashmir was so unnatural. I mean, when this line was drawn, a house that faithfully stood on the line of control was divided and two families living in it were separated. when you create divisions such as this, it's bound to create a humanitarian crisis. Sometimes people who own agricultural land on line of control found their only source of income being taken away from them. In one case, a boy was caught. This incident happened in 2002. A boy was caught by Indian Army, and he was handed over to the police in Kashmir. He used to cry and point at mountains. For police records, he became Bahrawal the Gunga, which loosely translates as deaf son of dumb. This kind of dehumanization that has happened because of this conflict will continue to take its toll on the people of Kashmir, and it will have terrible consequences in future for the peace of the subcontinent as well.
And it's those same kind of stories that other people are echoing here. Mohammed Faisal says, for 66 years, the aspirations of Kashmiris have been subjugated by the political games of two countries. Enough now. But Moeed, there's another tweet from Musarraf who says, does Pakistan have the time and the energy to think about Kashmir right now?
That's exactly, the point. If you look at the stories coming out of Pakistan, the top two stories today, this long march which is threatening to pull down the government, asking for its resignation, the Prime Minister, the arrest orders issued by the Supreme Court, the LOC, which is a huge issue, goes to number 3. But the first two are so important that I really don't think there's anybody who needs to be sitting down in the political class thinking about this has the time to do it. And that's very unfortunate, especially because another soldier, that means this is continuing on the LOC. So it's probably, the military which is thinking about this at this point, but no political actors involved.
Tridivesh, considering the breaking news with the dead Pakistani soldier, just yesterday the head of the military had a call for aggressive action if provoked, and then today the Prime Minister said it cannot be business as usual with Pakistan. Do you see what's unfolding now as a clear escalation of violence at the line of control?
Well, I really don't think that obviously this episode came as a shock, especially, as I said, especially after so much investment had gone into the peace processes from the Prime Minister, who has been under criticism.
Tridivesh, we're having trouble hearing you. We're going to have our folks clear that up, and Moeed, I'm going to toss that over to you. Does this look like an escalation to you, given what was said by the head of the military and then the Prime Minister?
As I said, I don't see this as a crisis yet. I think this is still localized. I think if the two commanders on the ground can be allowed to talk through this and draw up a new plan to make sure this doesn't happen in the coming days, I think you can pretty much quash it at this point. Your guest had talked earlier about sort of Pakistani politicians or military taking advantage. Actually, the funny thing is in Pakistan, it's not getting as much coverage as it otherwise would because of the domestic problems. And so I think you have an opportunity to sort of take this under the radar and very quickly settle it at the local level. Now, if you have a soldier a day in the next week or 10 days, political pressures, weak governments on both sides, the media, we don't know where this will end up. And then there's always the non-state actors, the militants, who've created a huge mess in the past. And you can't rule out anything in the India-Pakistan context, unfortunately. But so far, fingers crossed, I don't think we're there.
Let's go back to India to get the view from a blogger there in our hangout, Akhilesh Mishra, speaking to us from New Delhi. He's a political blogger. Akhilesh, there's a tweet here from Hamid who says, what happened at the line of control has been happening there since the line of control was created. Enough has been said, and this is going to continue. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree with this because I'll start by talking about the very premise of this program, which is that Kashmir is the core issue between India and Pakistan. This is fallacious argument. The core issue is not Kashmir. The core issue is Pakistan, because the very basis of formation of Pakistan is not India. So whatever work in India does not work in Pakistan. Democracy works in India, does not work in Pakistan. Civilian control of military works in India, does not work in Pakistan. A judiciary which works within confines in India does not work in Pakistan. It does a judicial coup which is unheard of anywhere in the world. The core issue is the very ideology of India. Even if this was Kashmir, Pakistan will find something else to fight India with. So this LOC is what happened in LOC recently is only a manifestation of the ideology of Pakistan. Unless we solve Pakistan, unless we dismantle the military jihadi complex in Pakistan, these things will continue. Talking about Kashmir.
You want to jump in on that?
I guess I was wrong about sort of the young generation thinking differently. I think this is a very
So you're saying he is more of the old guard line of thought?
No, I don't want to put anything words in his mouth. What I'm saying is I think this view, quite honestly, comes on both sides from people who have seen this from a particular lens and have not had as much exposure or access to thinking on the other side. I actually think that in Pakistan, at this point more than India, there is across the board virtual consensus on solving Kashmir and solving it pretty quickly and making compromises, finding a solution and moving on. Because of Pakistan's internal weakness, not because there's any love sort of lost for India or anything like that, but ultimately it's a very pragmatic decision that, we've held out for 65 years, it hasn't worked, we need to move on. I'm not sure I'm going to get into sort of the ideological business and what happens in Pakistan versus India. The fact is very simple. It's a disputed issue. LOC has been a troublemaker for a long time. Both sides agree there needs to be a solution. They had a formula in 2007. We really need to look ahead and solve these issues rather than point fingers at each other. It won't get us anywhere. These two countries have done this for 65 years.
I want to get back to this idea of what this really means to Kashmiris. I mean, we're talking a lot about this geographic struggle between two countries. Ashwaq Masoodi, I want to bring you in. She is a journalism student currently in New York, but she is Kashmiri. Is this a situation where the human voices have gotten drowned out? And if so, I want to hear a little bit about your story and your experiences and how you view this as a Kashmiri. Unmute yourself. There you go. Yep, perfect.
Yeah. Let's not be reductionists and believe that the Kashmir issue is just about the Indo-Pak relations or the engagement between the two countries. It's a far bigger and a more complex issue in itself. It's about the long, unheeded aspirations of the people. It's about the overwhelming and the growing urge for freedom. It's about azadi. It's about the desire for living lives with dignity. Let's not forget that. I mean, my experience of growing in conflict, it's like all of us. It's like all the people in my generation. It's listening to the voice of explosions, growing we saw as children. So our whole perception of the world is different from the perception of other children or the youth from the other parts of or from India.
And Ashwaq, you wrote a blog post called How I Learned to Write Obituaries. I pulled it up on my screen here. And in it you say, you talk of going to school that was shut because of bomb blasts. And that's not something that, everyone can relate to. So how do you portray or how do you get that message across of what it's like to grow up in that and how urgently a solution needs to be for that problem?
Well, the thing is that, right from the childhood, I remember having a threat of death all the time looming over us. We had a fear, we could not speak. The schools were closed. Every time in the middle of the day we were reminded that, hey, there's something happening, there's a bomb blast somewhere that has happened and you have to leave. It was like there was a perpetual angst, there was a perpetual anguish that we lived with. And it stayed with us. There was a time that personally, for some time I just pretended that things were normal, or I tried to efface the memories of the bad times, but it just comes back to you because you're living with it, because that's not what this is not what you want. Everyone wants to breathe the air of freedom.
Moeed, is a free and independent Kashmir, one, possible, and two, if so, how organized are Kashmiris to make that happen?
I think, first of all, we have to understand that the point just made about Kashmiris being at the center is absolutely critical. And Pakistan and India have come around to accepting this formally only very recently. After their peace process, they started talking much more about it. I don't think there's anybody who's seriously now talking and thinking about an independent Kashmir as a viable option. For Kashmiris, it still may be very important. But I think the shift has been, even in Indian Kashmir, to talk about autonomy, to talk about dignity and freedom of life rather than freedom from the Indian Union. That's been the change. Now, this can revert depending on how the Indian state manages this. 600,000 security forces and everything that you've just heard cannot be comfortable. And I think that's an internal Indian issue to resolve. Then you've got the blanket of the India-Pakistan problem, which comes in. But if you subsume the Indian problem under the India-Pakistan problem, Kashmiris get lost and left out. And that's what you shouldn't do. But ultimately, I think it has to come to a compromise solution. As I said, there was a formula in 2007 which would allow both sides of Kashmir to interact, to trade, to move freely, and for both sides of Kashmir to be demilitarized. For me, that is the starting point, at least, where we can get to.
Tridivesh, I want you to jump in here. React for me, if you would, to what Moeed has just said.
About Kashmir, is it?
Yeah, and about India's role in all of this, India's fundamental role.
You see, first of all, I would like to just make it clear to Moeed that I wasn't, speaking about the civilian government taking advantage of the situation. I was talking about a possible tussle between the civilian government and the military over there. I, in fact, underscored the fact that the civilian government in Pakistan has made some very bold efforts towards India. So, and it came as a bit of a shocker to me that, when they made such provocative remarks after this very unfortunate, thing on both sides, these skirmishes across the LOC. Now, as far as Kashmir is concerned, it's become part of the Indo-Pak sort of dialogue, whether we want to de-link it from that or not. But at the same time, I would say one thing that, as Moeed said, the discourse has definitely changed, and the Kashmiri, like anybody else, has aspirations, and the aberrations, there are certain things. I mean, if we can improve the quality of governance within the Indian Kashmir, if if human rights violations or excesses, if we are more harsh on whatever excesses, like if there's a zero tolerance policy towards that, I think we are moving in the right direction. So I don't think that the old discourse really holds out necessarily. But at the same time, yes, the Kashmiris obviously have a full right to live with dignity, and they also have aspirations.
We have about 30 seconds left in this main discussion, but we're getting about 35 tweets a minute on this discussion, which is a lot. I just want to read two here from Kashmiris. 4 profound words, 4 solemn pledges, 4 bywords, right to self-determination, and one more. This is where we fall out of the tree. Kashmiris want a free country, whether you like it or not, just as we were.
All right, we're going to hold these thoughts. Thanks to all of our guests today. This discussion is going to continue in our online post show. And at that point, we want to talk about what it's going to take for real progress in the area. But before we do that, here's Malika with a few other stories we're following.
Best dressed slideshows are a media staple to rack up page views, but a satirical website has taken its link bait in a scathingly different direction. Omar tweets, "The Onion has figured out how to make people see pictures from Syria, disguise it as a best dressed list." Well, by superimposing captions from Sunday's Golden Globes Awards over the photos, The Onion let the political commentary speak for itself. Presenter Jessica Alba steamed up the red carpet in this coral-hued, mermaid-style Oscar de la Renta gown, and check out that stunning diamond necklace and glamorous feathered clutch. Netizens applauded The Onion for calling the media out. Jaunty wrote, "The Onion shames everyone with this piece. Slideshow makers, award show followers, Syria ignorers. Damn impressed." Our next lead comes from Madrid, where an anti-austerity flash mob, is using music to brighten the days of the unemployed. A Spanish radio station organized musicians for an impromptu performance of Here Comes the Sun at an unemployment office. Spain's unemployment rate was recently reported the highest in Europe, and the video has resonated. It has more than 1 million hits in just a week. But what stories do you want to see on the stream? This is your show, so join our community and let us know. Just like us on Facebook and send us your pitch. Lisa?
All right, as mentioned, the post show is next. So if you're near a computer, log on to stream.aljazeera.com and join the rest of our discussion now on Wednesday. Vietnam's crackdown on bloggers and citizen journalists. We're going to examine the limits of free speech in that country. So send us your thoughts and your questions on that. And until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Stream's online post show. We're going to pick up our discussion right where we left off. Thanks to all our guests, Moeed, Tridivesh, and those in the Google Plus Hangout. Moeed, I want to get back to you on this idea of progress. I mean, we're talking about establishing or trying to again establish stability in the region between India and Pakistan. But even if that is done, that doesn't still necessarily address the needs of the Kashmiris. How do you move forward doing that?
Look, I think what has happened is that these two sides have approached Kashmir in a very militaristic way over the past 65 years. And you know, they've gone at it as if these are two countries who are fighting over a piece of land and whatever is in the land doesn't matter. The last decade or so, there's been a major shift, primarily because both sides realize with nuclear weapons, with the changes in the world, there is no war to be fought there anymore. You have to do something non-militarily to get this resolved. And that's where I think this compromise business has come in. There was a plan which says, as I said, essentially in the program, allow Kashmiris to cross, to meet, to trade, and leave it as an autonomous demilitarized region. The Pakistani president at the time came up with this. I think it got traction, but then unfortunate events on both sides really let it fizzle out. I think that's where you need to start with it again. As far as sort of the freedom and independence in Kashmir is concerned, you know, I can only tell you that data is very conflicted. If you go to the Kashmir Valley, which is the heart of it, you will still find the independent sort of movement and Azadi there. If you go elsewhere in Kashmir, not as much. And I, quite frankly, have to say that India is the stronger status quo power here. And there is no way I see India giving up on Kashmir. Simply because Kashmiris want it. It's an unfortunate truth, but it's the truth.
So being the status quo power, they really don't have to do much of anything.
Well, the compulsions are not there. On the Pakistani side, internal weakness, the chaos, budgetary issues, all of that has led Pakistan to see a new way of living next to India. With India, quite frankly, it's the rising power, it's the status quo power, and Westphalian states don't necessarily give up territories just because somebody asks them to do it.
Well, Faris Islam in our Google Plus Hangout, I want your views here. You are a writer for Dawn newspaper in Karachi. Iftikhar Ashraf and a few other people are pointing the finger at both India and Pakistan. On Twitter, Iftikhar says both the nations, India and Pakistan, have turned Kashmir into a matter of egos. This has been amplified by the jingoistic media of both. And the half-widow on Twitter says peace is a word that Indians and Pakistanis don't understand, and the ones who do, i.e. Kashmiris, will probably go extinct before it comes. Faris, what's the view from Karachi?
So I think they do point out some very interesting points. I think we have too often let the Kashmiri people be completely sidelined in this process. And through all this talk of forming borders, forming confederations between the country, at the end of the day is you can divide the land as much as you want, but you still have to be able to live next to your neighbors in peace. And I think there is a growing consensus, at least in Pakistan, that this has to happen. I think our generation is a generation that hasn't grown up with the memories of war or the traumas of partition. What we've grown up with is suicide bombings, is schools with sniper towers on them, a capital city where you can't drive for 5 minutes without going through a police checkpoint. We understand the terrors of terrorism. We understand what it does to a society, and I think we really understand that peace with India is crucial to try and address this issue and to move us forward. For us, India isn't sort of the big bad wolf living next door. For us, India is Bollywood. India is the South Asian success story. And there's so much more to our relationship with India than just Kashmir, that there's real potential to move forward on all of those fronts. And a hope, I think, that we can, and then after laying the groundwork for this, then we can try tackling Kashmir.
Tridivesh, it's not always easy to know who's calling the shots in Pakistan. Does that make it more difficult for India to settle this Kashmir issue?
Yes, I think that is one of the reasons, and you know, there are other complications as well. So, I mean, it's easy for for people to come with multiple solutions, do this, do that. But I think the first step would be, even if we can increase people-to-people contact, I mean, if you can make the borders more porous, that would be a good step. And as Moeed said, if the level of trade can, increase, and at the moment, I think people on our side of Kashmir and both sides actually complain of a very stringent visa regime. So the sad part is that we're talking about such big, issues on this show, and we're not even addressing the basic ones like the visa regime. if you look at the Indo-Pak relationship as a whole, there was a liberalization of the visa regime which was to be operationalized very soon, that people over the age of 65 would get visas on arrival, and that has been the first casualty of these skirmishes on the LOC. And then of course even Pakistani artists, sportsmen, and the sad part is that while the defense issues, the security issues have dictated this relationship, if anything can cement ties between both the countries, it's the softer things like culture and trade. But we've done the least on that account, and every time for some reason they get hyphenated with the overall tensions. That I think in every part of the world we've seen conflicts, but people have been sensible. They've dehyphenated certain issues of bread and butter from other issues. India and Pakistan have really faltered on that, and we punish the wrong people. It's a common man who suffers, it's innocents who suffer. I mean, for example, in the case of healthcare, it's the poor Pakistani who's really suffering the fact that he doesn't have free access to India, where he can get good healthcare at a much at a cheaper cost. So these are basic things which need to be addressed, and unfortunately they are the first casualties of such conflicts every time.
Right, and I'd like Akhilesh in our hangout to respond to that, and also respond to what Faris said earlier about the young generation wanting peace. There's a tweet here from Alim who says, corruption, unemployment, communal mistrust, illiteracy, enough battles. Young India wants peace, not war. Akhilesh?
Yeah, this is a fair question, and let me answer it this way, that people in Kashmir can choose to live because of their religion, or can choose to live because of a better life. So more jobs, better economic opportunities, better education, better social life, and so on. And actually there is a template for this in India, in the western state of Gujarat. Now there is a chief minister in that state who is hated by Muslims. But in this particular election in December last year, almost 25% Muslims voted for him, which is unheard of, because he changed the narrative from religion and religion-based politics to governance-based politics, aspirational politics. So if we can bring aspirational politics to Kashmir or between India and Pakistan, things will change. And which again makes my basic point, that the difference, the issues between India and Pakistan are about ideology. If we can keep that aside, India and Pakistan can prosper. And as an aspirational society, aspirational young people.
Ashwak, I want to go back to you, and let's talk a little bit about Kashmiri leadership. From your perspective, do you think Kashmiris feel they have the right people representing them, and people who can actually make the changes that they want to see happen in Kashmir?
We've actually lost hope, and we do not. We trust people, and we are betrayed. This just goes on. It's a cycle. We start believing in a particular person, and it seems like what we did was actually wrong, because, I mean, when Akhilesh pointed that the Muslims voted for Omar Abdullah, everyone knew that it was about development. He said that they changed the narrative, and he said that the peace could be brought in if development or things like these could be introduced in Kashmir. Kashmir doesn't. It's not what we want. I mean, of course, development is something that every nation wants. But, I mean, if you don't address the core issue, just forget about peace.
Jahangir, do you feel the same way? Do you feel a lack of optimism? Unmute yourself. Jahangir, there you go. About 30 seconds.
I certainly feel that. And there was one assumption that Mueed made at the beginning of the program, that this so-called peace process was driven by the youth in both sides of Kashmir. I think that is a very flawed assumption, because the peace process essentially was driven by politicians from the two sides of the divide. And had it been driven by the youth from the two countries, it would not have been blown apart as it has been by the killing of two soldiers at the borders.
All right, Jahangir, I'm going to have to stop you there because we are out of time. But thanks to all of our guests, Moeed, Trudevesh, and everyone in our Google Plus Hangout. Now on tomorrow's program, Vietnam's crackdown on bloggers and citizen journalists. We're going to examine the limits of free speech in that country. Until then, we'll see you online.